All right. Hello, everyone. We're back. This is William and Stephen from whoamipodcast.com. Today, we want to speak about the topic that we left open in last episode, and that is about parenting. It kind of was a natural successor of last episode when we talked about early childhood development, about sexual identity, and your place in your family situation and society. And now we want to talk about the role of the parent and the child, the dynamics between the two. Stephen and I are both not parents, but we have thought about this topic. And as always, we have more questions than answers, but we would like to share those with you. And you can comment on our discussion on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever. So I guess we can divide the question about parenting into two, at least two, where we can think from the perspective of the child. What was it like for us being raised? And secondly, how would we raise a child? Which is obviously hypothetical, not going from personal experience. But do you have any experience with babysitting or anything else that might help with this question?
Like you said, with experience I've had as like babysitting and stuff, is that I've got 4 nieces and a nephew. You have?
I have 2 nieces and 1 nephew at the moment.
Yeah. So we've
A little
both
while
been directly involved with the family side of things, and then we've both been amongst various different cultures and people where we've had the opportunity to interact with both parents and children on a weekly basis, really through education. I went to a summer camp in America and worked with what age group was about 6, 7 year olds, I think it was, for 3 months, and then interacting with parents when they came by and stuff. And there's plenty of, I guess, experience there.
good, yeah. You mentioned that you might have a plan of how you want to raise your children in the future, but it never goes that way anyway.
Yeah, I think that's the observation I've seen, is that we all, like, in our ideal situation, would raise children this way or that way. And that's the moment that when you have children, the opposite will have to take place, because a child completely is different to what you think should be the right thing, because children are all unique. And
Yeah.
until you experience it, I think until you experience it, obviously as a parent, but any more than 24 hours, I think once you've spent time with a child for 24 hours, having to go through the feeding them, the bedtime routine, and seeing that, then you can kind of project and get a bit of insight into how difficult it actually is. Because I think that as a society, we're getting more and more insular, it appears, and I think we are. And therefore, help isn't given as much to families as it should be, because you don't have the interaction with grandparents the way you used to. Like, you used to be all in the community. Like, if you're in a village, everyone would know who you were. You could drop them off at your neighbors or whatever, the children, as a parent, and then be able to do what you need to do, come back. Whereas now, trying to get childcare for families these days is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And should we be in a society that allows, I guess the question is, should we be in a society that allows parents to, at least one parent, whether male or female, whatever, to be able to have the time off, to be able to actually raise the children? And personal opinion is yes. It shouldn't have to be people you're paying for childcare or asking favors from friends.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I saw a study recently of parent time. I don't know what it's called. The time you get off work to look after a newborn.
Oh yeah.
And
Maternity leave and paternity leave.
yeah. So I translated it directly from the German parent time. It used to be called mother protection,
Mhm.
but these days, the father can just as well take that time, or it can even be split among the mother and the father.
Yeah.
Um, so that's an interesting development. But this survey, this study, showed what the law says about how long the maternity leave is, depending on which country you're in. And there was a wide variety, wide variance, which was really interesting. And I don't remember a lot of particulars, but the Eastern European countries had a pretty long time. I think also some of the Scandinavian ones. Um, I think Germany's really good with half a year or even more. And Andrew Yang likes to bring up in the debates and political debates for Democratic candidates for president that the U.S. and Papua New Guinea are the only two countries in the world that have no maternity leave, and that needs
Wow,
to. Yeah, it's crazy.
that's insane.
Yeah. So definitely, that early contact is most important. But after that, contact with parents and just learning from them 24/7 is not a whole lot less important than the very first few months. So yeah, it's a shame that jobs and making money has to come first, and then you leave someone else to do the parenting
Yeah,
or teaching. You know, parents often expect teachers at school and nursery to
especially as a
do.
single parent. Like, obviously with two parents, it's pretty hard in itself. I've got loads of friends who are single parents, and obviously they do get help from time to time from friends or family, and from like the government a little bit with money towards childcare and stuff. But the equivalent level of help is just it's diabolical. It should be so much more than it actually is, um, to help someone who is trying to raise a child by themselves,
Yeah,
because it's not exactly their fault. Like, this is a weird thing. It's like it's almost like they're punished because the other person left or something, and it's like, yeah, wow, it's a bit
yeah,
strange.
that's the whole issue in itself. Why are there more single parents these days than there used to be?
Yeah,
Um, maybe
I guess
for another episode.
another episode. Yeah, we can link back to, I guess, our own personal experiences. I guess, like like you said at the start. I derailed it a bit with my like my brain switched off. But like our own personal experiences as children, interacting with our own parents. I guess. Is that all right? Just jump back to that.
Yeah, cool, of course. Yeah, we
Cool.
see a lot from how they interact with each other and with us. We
Yeah.
kind of derive a lot about what society should be like, what the ideal family should be like. We
Yeah.
uh, we like some things that we experience in the household. We dislike some things. We plan to do things just the opposite from what we experience, and some things we like about our parents.
Yeah. And
Um,
often we don't like it at a certain point in time, and then we grow and we mature, and then we perhaps go, "Oh, hang on a minute, that actually probably was the right thing for us." Again, hindsight as a growing consciousness, individual person, you kind of go, "Okay, yeah, fair enough. I see why that was that way now." But at the time, especially, you go through those teenage years that you remember. Because I remember certain things as a kid, like little things that I maybe wasn't happy with. But then later on, again as a teenager, you're going through loads of stuff, and therefore um, remember those more uh, like prevalently. That's the wrong word.
strongly.
Yeah, more. Yeah, strong. More, yeah, strong. Like, yeah,
My father has this saying about the perspective of a teenage boy, how his father used to be really stupid, and then when the boy turned 20 or so, his father suddenly became a lot smarter in a very short time.
sometimes.
And then and then I hear when you have your own first child, you're like as a young woman, you have your own first child, your mom becomes your best friend all of a sudden because you're on the phone all the time asking for advice. It's
Yeah.
a big change all of a sudden in your life,
Yes.
your
Again, when those
priorities
changes
shift.
happen. Yeah. we often default to the wanting that parental um, safety net, I guess.
Yeah.
So people that have semi good relationships or even good relationships with their parents will often, when they're older, as you say, 20 years plus, if they need help, default. And that's the person they know they can rely on the most, or they feel they can rely on the most. If they have a good relationship with their parents.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas people that don't, let's say they don't have their parents aren't around anymore, or have a bad um, like relationships, they don't actually see them or anything, they often yearn for that parental safety net. They're just like, I wish I could speak to my mom, or I wish I could speak to a dad, or whatever. It's often if in times of crisis and trauma that tends to be the go-to,
Mhm.
which is interesting concept. Whether that's again genetic or whether that's social cultural, it'll be interesting to again if we knew the answers to those kind of things. Often again, it's a bit of both, but because you've always got like I guess there is just something about the family unit sometimes that you feel you can rely on more if it's a tight knit one.
Yeah. And if you don't have a parent to rely on, or that you grew up with and had a good relationship with, then it's really important for you to have another uh, father figure or mother figure to rely
Yeah,
on
we
in times of uncertainty.
we often again I guess to link it back to when I was a kid, obviously. Well, my parents went through a divorce. I think I was probably 6 or 7, I think it is, and um, I often looked for other male figures to latch onto. I still say my dad, but because it wasn't as much as I would like, I guess, I therefore, when I was at social events with friends and family and stuff, I would, yeah, there'd be a uncle or parent's friend or whatever that I would um, just spend more time with. I look for that, I guess, male figure to be in my life.
Yeah, it's important.
And I think we get to pick and choose as we get older. Like I still will always rely on my parents loads, but even for my teens, I found many maternal and paternal figures to be like a parent, like a mum or a dad, not the mum or dad. Again, it's important for me to separate those things because my parents have been amazing. Like my mum and stepdad and my dad have been incredible. But during those times, especially again as a teenager, you're not necessarily going to trust your parents. You just don't. You think they're ignorant and stupid and they don't know what they're talking about. The old good old, oh, you don't know what you're talking about type as a teenager, and often they did, but we just weren't. Well, wasn't willing to listen. Um, so would find someone else that could fill that space and that had the knowledge, I guess, that I was looking for, or the uh, kindness, maybe, or time. I don't know. To just someone that I guess it's more about me. It's more about me than my parents. My parents were willing to listen and willing to help, but I, as a teenager, wouldn't give them that chance and would find other people to do that, and saw them as mothers and fathers in a way.
Yeah, I heard that in the beginning, as a child, you're dependent. Then, as a teenager, you're counter-dependent, um, which is kind of a necessary step towards the next phase, which is independent. So, being it's you know, counter-dependent is we also call it rebellious sometimes, and but it's necessary to try out things, I guess, and see what works best. And then independence is also not sustainable. You do need help, food, shelter, all the basics, and
Yeah,
you cannot. You usually people cannot get all of those for themselves, um, and
straight away.
so after a while you learn interdependence, and that's the the top that you want to get to, the best state where you realize you need people and they need you. Everyone has their value, has their contribution. Yeah, at least that's what everyone's process should look like.
That's
So
a
it
good way of
may
describing it. I like it.
be necessary to go through a kind of rebellion. Um, but I have found that as a teenager, you might have this unrealistic view of your parents about how stupid they are,
Yeah.
and then when you do become more independent, you realize more and more, or I should say, I realize more and more how my parents do have weaknesses and limitations. They used to be invulnerable and just godlike to me. I don't know how else to say it. Just entirely dependable, always know what to do, wise, And now I see, well, not now, but for the last years, I have seen more and more their weaknesses. Um, it's good of them to not try to hide them and be honest about them. So
That yeah, that's a that's
unfortunately,
an
it wasn't
important
a
factor.
disappointment. It was just something I had to get used to and learn to deal with. That I cannot rely on them for everything. They always want to help me, just the same as they always have. But now I realize they cannot always help me. And so sometimes I will need to look elsewhere for help. But
Yeah.
never, I never really want to lose contact with them just because the dynamic and the roles have changed a bit. So I've even told my mom once that I see us more as friends now rather than dependent and caretaker.
Yeah. I think that is the goal, where being able to be friends. Yeah, like because again, I liked again the you talking about the dependence, counter dependence. That links very much with the you start off by thinking they're infallible and they can't make a mistake, and then you think they're like ignorant and you lose that perspective. And that's where that links seems to link in with the counter dependence. And then when you become independent, you probably just don't even think about it. You go try and go do your own thing. And then when you become interdependent, you realize that they actually have their strengths and weaknesses, and then you can help them, and they can help you, and you can become friends. Because like my mom's one of my best friends, without question. Like I can talk to her about anything. Um, that was never the case until about 22, 23 maybe. Before that, it was like, okay, love her, she's my mom. Would talk about stuff, but I guess I didn't give her the trust she deserved, maybe, for whatever reasons. And then once I grew up and realized that actually, um, that it's optimal to both be there for each other, then because yeah, there's so many times that I'm there for my mom, like, and that's what friendship should be. It should be a two-way thing. I think a lot of people think the parent thing and child thing should just be all the adults there all the time for the child. But again, the interdependence is amazing, where it's like actually she helps me out loads, and then she knows she can come to me and talk to me about stuff if she needs to, and does. Very lucky to have that in my life.
Okay, neither of us are parents yet, but I'm sure you've thought about this before. What will you do once there is a little person in your life and you're responsible for their development and feeding and shelter and clothing and all of that, obviously. But let's stay focused on the ethical, emotional, mental factors. What difficulties do you expect there will be once you have that huge responsibility for a child, for your first child?
Yeah, it's a good question, because obviously this podcast is who am I, but how do you deal with when you have um, somebody that's learning the whole process themselves, so that they're going through the process of who are they, but you're still also going through the process of who am I. So you're trying to be a good parent and do the right thing, but are you doing the right thing for you, or are you doing the right thing for the child? That's like, um, or not even the right thing, or just the thing that you think is right, because there's a difference, obviously, between potentially there's supposed to be some sort of, maybe 5 different right things, because again, it's not always just one, and then multiple, like, actually bad things, and then shrug, does it matter as long as you get a sort of right answer? Who knows? But yeah, when I have a child, who knows? Like, I've thought about it a lot, but again, in the moment, you can't predict really how you're going to respond. You can just try and prepare yourself as much as possible to be ready for those insane, again, from what I've seen, parenting. I think a lot of people that haven't been around the nitty gritty of parenting think parenting isn't that difficult. But when you see the blood, sweat, and tears that happens, you start to lose a lot of the sort of judgments around parenting, like, oh, they should do that, or they should do this. But to get on topic, stay on focus, is I think there are certain things which, yeah, are right or wrong. Like, for example, discipline. Discipline's a primary part of parenting.
And disciplining. Is that what you're getting at? Like, to enforce?
Yeah. Yes. So to help an individual child understand what is right and wrong.
Yeah. When I was a child, I thought my parents could do no wrong. I rarely ever saw them make mistakes. Obviously, the older I got, the more obvious it became that they are fallible too. But, in the beginning, just whatever the parent does is the right thing. And I suppose a naive parent will think that whatever is right for them is right for everyone. And therefore, there is no difference between what is right for the child and what is right for the parent. But the older I get, the more I realize how clueless and naive people are, even at the age of being parents. I mean, that's a parent. But now that I am at that age, I wonder how bad of a job I would do if I suddenly were a parent. And it can happen suddenly. We often have those 9 months to prepare.
Yes.
But even that isn't a long time, considering all the things that you could learn to, in theory, become a perfect parent. But even then, I think you need to just practice when the time comes.
Experience. Yeah. Like, you made an interesting statement about how bad a parent I'm going to be, and I think it's an interesting perspective, but I think it's actually the correct one for everyone, because I think we all try and think, we'll be the best parents, good parents, but no matter what we do, it's never going to feel good enough as a parent. Like, you will love your child. Well, again, if you're an ideal parent, you will love your child and you'll try and do the best for them. But to the child, it will probably, again, for most of their childhood and teenage years, it'll never be enough what you do. And to yourself, you'll feel that way. So it's limiting the amount of, I guess, bad and damage that's done. I know it sounds really, like, extremely negative, but I think that's kind of just how parenting is. I think you're never going to get it right. That's my own personal opinion. No matter what you choose, there's going to be something that, again, ideally right. Again, right is such a wrong word to use. Optimum, maybe.
I think I get your point. Obviously, you can prepare and avoid like huge mistakes.
Yeah.
You need to work on yourself before you can attempt being a parent. Like you can, for example, I think maybe an easy one is nutrition. Like what do you feed a baby? And there are, in the beginning when they have no teeth, you need to be very careful what you feed them. Malnutrition is a crime for babies. They just get to be fat. You should just think of it as cute rather than wrong. And then it gets a lot subtler, of course. But yeah, you're right. No matter how well we prepare, we're going to make some mistakes. I know of a psychologist who is in the media sometimes, Gabor Mate, I think his name is, and his son is also in the media as a reporter, Aaron Mate. And so Aaron has even interviewed his father on his news show. But the father admitted that, yeah, I know, I'm fully aware that my weaknesses were transferred onto my son. And I'm not excusing myself. It's just, it is difficult to see. Sometimes for him, it must become apparent that, oh, that what he just did must be painful for him, but it comes from the mistakes I made when he was small. But somehow they just live with it and try to improve themselves along the way. We all take some form of trauma or pain from our childhood with us that we were not able to process or accept at the time, and then work on it later on in life. So it's, I guess, rather than trying to prevent every mistake, it's good to become aware of them, become aware of the weaknesses that we pass on as parents and that we receive from parents, and be forgiving and loving, and just deal with our own weaknesses rather than trying too hard to correct other people.
Yes, yeah. You mentioned obviously loving, and parenting is very much a, I guess, selfless act, because the amount of time and energy that it takes to be a parent, like most parents lose their social life, they lose a lot of their social life, and that you have to have a mental barrier because you can end up resenting your child. So if you, without realizing, having to feed, clothe, stay up late till 3 a.m. looking after your ill, sick child, all these different things have a psychological effect on, again, on the parent first of all, and then if the parent isn't loving enough, doesn't tap into that biological and psychological necessity, then yeah, you end up resenting your child, like, because you feel that they're being selfish, even though it's just the nature of their development. They need someone, so it could be a struggle to make sure you don't, as a parent, let that take over. Because I know so many parents that are like that. Like you just see in their eyes they will on the surface be doing what's needed to be done, but the little huffs and the eye rolls and the eyebrows raises and all these little facial expressions that show deep down, they're exhausted of being a parent. And I think that's because a lot of people become parents, again, it's controversial, when they're not ready.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that at all?
I don't know if you're ever ready. I just had to think of John McAfee, who recently said, who wanted to give advice to young men. And he said, don't get married before you're 40 because you won't know what you're doing. And then people commented, what about women? You can't just give advice to men. And he said, well, most of them are just as applicable to him anyway. But I guess he could just put himself in the shoes of young men better than young women. I don't know.
Yeah.
But no, I don't advocate people not getting married or starting a family until they're 40.
Yeah, me neither. It's a general statement of like, I guess there should be more education, more, again, you're never ready for parenting, you're never ready for that kind of commitment, that kind of process. There should be so much more help and preparation before you do that, I guess, is probably what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think most of the education you get about that is not formal, but comes from your parents and maybe friends who have been through the process already, who have started the process already. But there are sources for formal training. I know some universities even have courses and entire subjects for I don't know what they're called, but family, household, stuff like
Family
that.
planning. Yeah, it's usually what we call it over here, but I don't know what the translation would be.
Yeah. Yeah, and these days you can find all kinds of stuff on the internet. You just obviously need to be
Oh yeah,
careful again not to believe junk. Use common sense.
yes.
But I think people in general just feel the need to help children because children are so vulnerable and dependent. So if I walked on the street and saw someone abusing their child, even though it's none of my business in a sense, I would feel a strong force to intervene.
And what's interesting is, so would they in the roles were reversed. So because they're a parent and dealing with their child, like kind of what I talked about a few minutes ago, because they're a parent and dealing with it all the time, and they're constantly drained by the situation because they don't have enough barriers put up over time. They haven't learned the process of not letting tiredness and exhaustion overcome love. Because we can be out on the street, like you say, and see someone if they're in pain. People generally are lovely because they're like, oh, an innocent child, we must protect them. But if you let's say you take 100 people of the age of 20 and give them a child of the age of 3 for a month, by then that month, those 20-year-olds would just be going nuts. They would be sleep deprived. They would be depressed. They would be, like, most of them, again, maybe not all, but most of them would be. And they would be at borderline, probably like disciplining too harshly to the children, to keep them quiet, using all the easy methods, like give them the computer all day, TV all day, just to keep them quiet. Again, in small doses, believe it's fine. But it's a fascinating, I guess, contrast between what we can handle from the outside to what we can when we're an actual parent.
Yeah, interesting.
And that would be cool education. I think everyone should. I think literally, I think society should give people between the age of, I guess, 15, 16, or up to 20, every year have a week, 48 hours, just with a young child, because it would give them, like you say, the experience of how it works, but also it would make them think twice before just going ahead and having children straight away.
In two cartoons, I think I've seen something like this, and that gives me the thought that maybe in American high schools there is an experiment, at least like that, where a boy and a girl, like everyone will get paired up, so that you're like parents, and a boy and a girl will each get an egg, maybe with a face drawn on it or something, and the task is to keep it safe for 1 week. Like, can you at least make sure that the egg doesn't crack, or something similar like that? And
that's so demoralizing. It's horrific because I get the sentiment of the psychology behind it all, but it's like, if you fail that experiment, you then are made to look like a horrific person.
I don't know. It'll at least give you something to think about.
Yeah, true. And then also, it's nothing like actually being a parent.
Yes.
Because you're getting no reward. Because the good thing about parenting is actually the positive side of it. You know, I've talked a lot about the negative side.
Yeah.
But at the positive side, where you literally have this incredible intellectual being that's can be happy, fun, and teach you so much. Oh my goodness, my nieces and nephews have taught me so much of just how to, again, be a better person.
Yeah, that's true. None of that would be in the experiment. Yeah. I love to play with my nieces and nephew as well. I often don't think of it as learning, but you're right. there's plenty we can learn from people younger and less experienced than us. Because, well, one reason is that they have less care, less of a burden in this world. And so you can be reminded of all the things that you miss out on because you worry so much about things that are not so important, but just necessary, apparently, maybe. So you get reminded of the basics and what makes you happy, because that's
That
all children just want to
is
be
a
happy all the time, no matter the consequence.
Yeah, that's a perfect statement right there. Like they teach you how to be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you summed it up perfectly.
Yeah, we often think there are these two worlds, the one where children live in this blissful ignorance, and then the real world that they need to be prepared for. And so if we really believe that there is a difference between the two, we must take ourselves so seriously when we think that we have the experience that our children are lacking, and that we need to imbue them with it. Maybe like planting a seed and hoping that when they are of age that they will have the toolbox they need to deal with the world. There's so many things that can go wrong with that, so I don't like that view. That's why I was mentioning it in a sarcastic way. But we need to think of their future in some way and try to prepare them for it. So what things do you think should we concern ourselves with?
Good question. Where to start with that one? Yeah, that's what parenting is, I guess. It's like, where do you start with preparing your children for?
Yeah, like what are the basics? Before the show, we mentioned choosing between right and wrong.
Yeah.
To be something that children learn from parents, and that's automatically. You don't even need to teach that to them explicitly. They will just see how you behave in certain situations, and then assume that that is what a good person does.
Yeah.
I guess that presupposes that they accept you as a good person and you have a good connection.
I guess that again, the basics of treat others like again, like you want to be treated, compassion, empathy, awareness of your own needs. 'Cause again, it's so easy to swing to one extreme or the other. Again, always focus on others, but always focus on yourself. There has to be a fine line when parenting, because often, like the prime example is if a child has someone comes over, like another child is play date or whatever, that child is playing with your child's toys, and your child is upset and therefore wants their toys back, and then you've got this whole process of trying to teach about sharing. But then at the same time, has a child learned about possession and what's actually theirs, and it's okay to have theirs? They shouldn't always give away what is theirs, because then they themselves will end up having nothing in their life. Again, these are things, but it's just a general basic lesson that gets a bit muddled sometimes. That's a prime example of one lesson that you can try and work on.
I'm confused about that topic myself. Does that say anything about my my bringing up?
Sorry, say that again?
I myself am confused about the topic of possession and sharing.
Yes.
Does that say anything about my bringing up?
I'm confused too, mate. Still, like, at what point is it okay to
claim
keep everything
something
for yourself so you're happy?
Yeah.
Because it brings you happiness, and then you give it to somebody else, and yeah, you can get happiness from that. That can be a psychological programming that you can be generally happily from that, and an emotional good response. But again, deep down, do you resent the person for having that because you want it? And at what point do you end up being miserable because you have nothing? And again, it's lessons. I think the key lesson is adaptation. I think again, in any specific situation, the circumstances can be different. So you're trying to teach your child that in any given situation, they can find what's optimal for them and then someone else. That's my personal opinion, because you have to protect yourself. You have to be happy yourself. You have to generally be looked after. You have to learn to look after yourself. So that should come first. And then if you can, use the experiences you've gained to help others. But in any specific situation, that can change. Like one time, the best option is to, again, look after yourself, not go outside and socialize or something because you're tired as an individual. And then another time, you may be tired and exhausted, but actually someone's health is so bad that you have to go and help them, or you feel you have to go and help them, or you feel the thing is to go and help them, and you put your own thing aside. It all depends on, again, the specific moment. Okay.
I like what you said about empathy earlier, because yes, a lot of questions can be answered by putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
Bingo.
You know, how would that make you feel if someone did that to you? And I believe most people have that ability. There are psychopaths who actually can't do that, and so they have a really hard time learning how to deal with other people.
Now that's an interesting discussion for the future.
Yeah. I don't want to leave the average person. I don't want to leave the norm, like what most people go through too much today. But sure, yeah, sociopathy, psychopathy could be another great topic for another day.
Yeah.
So everyone has the capacity in that sense for empathy, but we need to help children become aware of it and how to use it, how to not overuse it. You know, there are people who sacrifice themselves too much for other people's well-being. That's a challenge as well. So everything in balance.
Yeah, personal experience. I think this is the key point of this whole discussion. I think is the empathy. I think you are. My personal opinion is that you're right. That actually is almost 90% of difficulties between us and other people can be solved by empathy, by going, how would I feel if I was them? And it can lead to a better situation. But in terms of going too far with the empathy, I, as a teenager and into my early adulthood, had too much empathy. Like I could imagine what it was like in a lot of situations that people go through, and it would leave me crying like for days. Like I would literally get home from school or get home from work, and just that's all I could do was just because I've got 10 different people I know all going through struggles, and then able to actually feel what each of those people could feel, or at least imagine what they could feel. Because again, that's the difference. And yeah, just would be overwhelmed by it, would not be able to function because my heart and soul hurt for them. So it's important to, as you said, to make sure we don't go to the other extreme, because actually I'm a personal believer that too much, I guess, again, empathy or love can be just as bad as too much hate and selfishness.
Yeah, it sounds like there might have been situations where the person you felt for didn't even have to go through the pain that you went through when you imagined what it must have been like for them, because they somehow could suppress it or switch it off.
Yeah, they could probably deal with it better than I could. That's what's interesting.
Yeah.
And so as a parent, going back to the point, is that, yeah, you need to be teaching your child about empathy. Definitely, because it's a beautiful thing that I think would solve a lot of problems.
Yeah. Not everything is easily transferable. Like it can be also really difficult to put yourself in someone else's shoes, or when someone treats you a certain way because they believe they know what it's like for you and actually they don't. So there are other pitfalls there as well.
Very good point. Yeah.
Again, a parent cannot prepare you for everything like that. So it's something you need to keep working on for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
It's like a parent can draw on the experience they got until they became a parent, and then they try to help you out with in any way they can with that experience, but it will never cover everything, and so you need to make your own experience too.
Yeah.
And that's when we get to that stage that we mentioned earlier, how you become more of friends and you're more on the same level and you start to need each other, and you are interdependent, like you said.
You have that choice to do what you want, and you have the agency, but also the difference between theory and practice. So your parents have told you everything about how life works, but unless you go through it yourself as an individual, then all that theory means nothing really, unless you're able to apply it in a practical way yourself.
I have another question about Freud. He said that our psyche is made up of 3 parts. You've probably heard this. Very popular theory. The ego, the superego, and the id. Yeah, you know those terms? Or
Sorry,
they have different names. But my understanding is that the superego is like a conscience. It tells you what is right and wrong. And I don't know if we are born with those or how much they come from our upbringing. I wonder if you know more on this topic, especially this thing that I heard, that the father, even more so than the mother, will be internalized in the child's psyche as the superego of the child. And I wonder if it's rather the father, because he's usually the one who makes the rules. This is how it's going to be. And then the mother is typically the more forgiving, merciful part. Like, oh, don't worry about it too much. It'll be okay next time. But the father's like, no, the law is the law. And society is built up in much the same way, where we have like police and law, but we also have friends. And, it's like a mirror of the parent situation. And one of the reasons that Americans vote for someone like Trump is because they like being told what is right and what is wrong by a strong man. This comes from that internal psychology about parenting as well. So it has huge consequences and is reflected in many parts of life. But back to my question, do you think there's anything to that a parent can actually have so much influence on a child's development that they will give the child a sense of right and wrong for many years, maybe their whole life, until the child finally realizes that the parent isn't perfect, and no, they didn't know what is right and wrong properly. A lot of it they decided for themselves or got from their parents and just passed it on.
Yes, there's definitely a secular nature to parenting. Like it must be from both the parent and the child. The parents obviously giving information, doctrine, rules, non-rules, whatever, to the child receiving and wanting just to please the parent, that it becomes such a bond, such a connection of this is what's right, this is what's wrong. That yes, I think there is many cases. Again, every child's different. Some children straight away kind of, if they feel their parents' perspectives aren't necessarily right or whatever, they can change them and adapt. whereas a lot of, I think the majority seem to, through those things I just mentioned, repeat what their parents taught them. That's why we have situations where families will stay the same, like political view or same religion, because those things have been so ingrained and installed in the individuals through generation to generation. So yeah, I think there's definitely a factor there, and I think it's why we don't evolve as in our mental and emotional and our broadening of perspectives as much as we probably should think we should as a species, because I think that one, the desire to be right, and two, the desire to make others see that we are right. Therefore, that happens into the child, then over and over again, the child has the same perspective and wants their child to see that they're right as a parent. And why things don't change, I think. Because again, if you look back at history, it just constantly repeats itself, and it's constantly.
Yeah, I like that perspective. How you look at humanity as a species over a long time frame, and it'll show you some positive things, but also some negative things like stagnation. Yeah, because greed, for example, is contagious and can take over your life and your community, your whole way of life. But then there are always people who are more interested in being ethical and doing something that's right for everyone. And it doesn't mean that anyone really knows what's right and wrong, especially for other people. As you were talking, I was thinking of science and whether scientific research can help with this question. There are people who believe it can. This is in the field of humanism, for example, where I'm no expert. Maybe you know more on the topic than I do, but people in this field just want to learn what is objectively good and right. And some things are really obvious to us. For example, inflicting unnecessary pain in someone else.
Again,
most people will probably
how
think
do you define unnecessary pain?
Yeah.
Again, this is a great thing about science and philosophy and morality and ethics, because like unnecessary pain, well, sometimes I don't know. Again, I could make so many different questions, but I'll try not to derail us too much as I usually do.
No, but it's a good critique, because a child, for example, will not always see what is the use of something that you inflict upon it, but the parent will.
Yeah, well, vaccination is a prime example.
Sorry, what
so
is?
if you want a vaccination, so
Okay.
in the moment the child thinks, oh, this is painful, what are you doing to me, run away, so it thinks it's unnecessary pain, but we believe that by giving obviously the vaccination and see the science behind it, that actually it's beneficial to the child.
I find it helpful to always think of the parent as a big child, and that they would seem just as clueless as a child to them, to someone who has more experience. So you're never done learning and evolving. And I guess people who think just the opposite of humanists and certain scientists are the religious people who believe that all right and wrong has to come from God. And I think you can go too far in that direction. You can become irresponsible by just looking up what the Bible says for every question. But for one, it doesn't cover every question that we have these days. But also, if God wants us to do right and wrong, he doesn't want to be a dictator. He doesn't want to have to command us in every matter. but wants us to learn what is right and wrong for ourselves. And we want similar things for our children. So there again, it's not quintessential to do the right thing all the time, but to learn what is right in a natural way.
Yeah.
And that process in itself, I think you need to see the value of that process to be a good parent.
Yeah. Because over, like we talked about I seem to know a lot of the like psychological theory, but I never know who said it or where it comes from. And so, we're discussing earlier on about Freud and superego, and the three different things. And I think that part of parenting and with each other is teaching that we can change. So a lot of people don't believe they can change that impression. So if you've been if constantly been taught a certain way by parent or whatever, and by yourself you may overcome it, but it's not the change that you have to change it, it's that you can change it. So if we teach each other that we can change things, that if we want to, if we feel it's right or wrong ourselves personally, that it can be changed. Because often it's more of a dictator thing for everyone. It's like, oh, you must change this, your parents were wrong, or you mustn't change whatever. So, well, no, that's up to the person as an individual, have that right to come to those conclusions themselves. So it's teaching them that actually, if they want to, they can change. So that option is there, and over time, that will help them to realize that when time comes to them to want to change, if they do, and that they can.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like big children trying to be smart enough to tell little children what to do.
When often the little children are actually right.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing. I once saw on YouTube how a father had a son with special needs physically and mentally. I don't remember the exact condition, but that's not so relevant anyway. And he was interviewed about his life and asked things like, does your son hinder you with leading a fulfilled life? Does he make it difficult for you to do the everyday stuff, be it working or going shopping or whatever? And the father was he wasn't offended, but he was very surprised at this foreign perspective, because he said, my son is the greatest blessing I could ever ask for in the condition he is in, because there's so much I can learn from him. And if it weren't for his condition, then maybe he would, I mean, this is very much paraphrasing, but he would probably be so normal in a way that I couldn't have this unique experience and learn certain things that you can learn only from people who are so pure and who have very different priorities than most other people. So that was very eye-opening and humbling to see, because it's true.
And that learning is love, isn't it? That learning is you learn how to love and to be loved in a very extreme way.
When people talk about old people as being a burden, like a financial burden, because they're no longer contributing to society in the sense of like creating profit.
So disgusting. Yeah.
That's disgusting. And the least you can say objecting to that is that, and this is also what some old people tell themselves to alleviate their own conscience when they feel like they're a burden to younger people. They can say that old and sick people are there to teach you humility, to give you the opportunity to serve, to look after someone else than just yourself or your company or whatever. And so that is, if there is no other reason than at least that, why we should have sick and old people or dependent people in our surrounding.
it's almost as if the nature of existence is designed to teach us one extreme of how to love or one extreme of how to be selfish. It's just like, you think about parenting and children and being an adult and being an elderly person, just everything is designed to either take you to one extreme or the other, really. Whether it's to look at what could be classed as positive of a situation, like that father, where he was just like, no, this is teaching me all about how to be a better person. Same with, again, children, same with elderly. Or again, like we talked about right near the start, about how you could easily fall into the trap of resenting and hating and being upset by a situation. And it's almost like we have to constantly put on our conscious choices to be able to stay positive and stay happy and stay to learn from these situations and to do what feels right, what seems right, and make sure that, again, the happiness, the love is what is actually prioritized.
Yeah, that's a great note to end on.